You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Alright, you're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Today is Thursday, July 27th in the year of our Lord 2017. And it's time for part 3 of our podcast miniseries, hashtag Third Party Problems. You wanted it, you got it. It's time for the Constitution Party. In addition to the Constitution Party, today we're going to be exploring some remarks from Dr. Kelly Ward that have garnered some severe controversy following the cancer diagnosis of sitting Senator John McCain. We're also going to discuss Obamacare Light, Trump Care, Nothing Care, the Senate's failure. Today on the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Good evening, everybody. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Thanks for sticking around. I'm Matt Holloway from Phoenix, Arizona. So, today it is time for our third installment. Yeah, that's right, the third part of our 5-part series, Third Party Problems, and today we're going over the Constitution Party. Now, the Constitution Party in 2016 fielded the nationally recognized candidate, Darrell Castle. He received some prominence due to being supported by prominent conservatives like Glenn Beck. Unfortunately, big-name support did not result in big-name recognition or big-name votes for Darrell Castle, and the Constitution Party did not make a really big noticeable splash in the 2016 election. So, really, what is there to say with regards to this third-party option, and do they really represent a viable third-party option in the United States? Well, I wanted to just get to the cold results here and give you an idea. Okay? So Darrell Castle ran in 2016, and there was a noticeable change in the percentages, although in many states, Castle only was on the ballot in write-in status. I'll give you a couple examples here. Alabama, there were write-in status and negligible votes. Alaska, 1.21% of the vote. They were on the ballot there. Arizona, they were a write-in. They got a total of 1,058 votes here in Arizona, which is like a 200% jump. In Arkansas, they got 4,500 votes. Colorado, 11,699 votes, which is 0.42% of the total voting population. In Connecticut, 147 votes. All said and told, total nationwide, okay? And I'm talking the entire country, 203,026 votes. That is 203,026 votes. And we got to ask that question real quick. What is the population of the United States?
It's 323.1 million in 2016.
Okay, that was from my beautiful co-host Google. So 323.1 million people in the United States in 2016. So not everybody in the United States, of course, is of voting age, but 203,026 people. It's an overall increase for the party of 63.47% over the 2012 election when they offered up Mr. Good as their candidate. But I really have to say, the Constitution Party is an excellent party in theory. Seriously, they're an excellent party in theory. They're just not off the ground yet. And this is the same that I felt about the Federalist Party, although the Federalist Party is much newer. The Federalist Party, we had J.D. Rucker on not too long ago, is a entirely new creation that just came about here in the post-Trump election. Meanwhile, the Constitution Party has been around since 1992. The party's founder, Howard Phillips, was on the ballot in 21 states as its first presidential candidate. So, we have 2012 where Virgil Goode, who was a 6-term Virginia congressman, carried the nomination for the Constitution Party. So we've had some prominent names, but just no major electoral wins. Now, I know a lot of people are going to jump up and they're going to poo-poo that statement, but we have to face facts. Now, I want to give you an explanation of the Constitution Party, kind of the same explanation that I would ask for if I was able to get one of them to appear on the show. Unfortunately, we couldn't make that happen this week. And I've reached out by Twitter, their email system, and it looks like they're either flooded with requests or they don't have the manpower necessary to answer back. We'll see what happens after the podcast. If they contact me, I'll be happy to welcome them on, so that way we can discuss at greater length. But the mission statement of the Constitution Party is this. The mission of the Constitution Party is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity through the election at all levels of the government of Constitution Party candidates who will uphold the principles of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Bill of Rights. It is our goal to limit the federal government to its delegated enumerated constitutional functions. Based on that, I would think I'm on board here. So, the 3 pillars that they go by are integrity, liberty, and prosperity. And there's rather lengthy text here on constitutionparty.com, so I urge you to go check them out and read it. But the long and short of it is that this is a party which is derived and created to limit the federal government to strictly a direct interpretation of the Constitution, which I am largely in favor of. Now, I wanted to play for you the 7-minute long Why I Am Running for President of the United States from Darrell Castle. And I wanted to also read to you an excerpt from a very recent article posted by their current chairman. Their current chairman, I'm probably going to butcher his name, is Frank Flukiger, I believe, or Flukiger. And his most recent post on their website is a message from the chairman, Theocracy and the Constitution Party. Because based on the Castle candidacy, it seems that a large amount of pushback has developed around the Constitution Party with the notion that it is a theocratic party. And I want to make sure that we give the words of Frank Flukiger, I believe it's Flukiger or Flukiger, somebody correct me on that one, please. Give his words a chance here, and I urge you to check that out again. That's the message from the chairman under News and Blog on constitutionparty.com. We'll go over a couple of the key points, because I don't believe that the Constitution Party represents a theocratic party, but I do believe they make some very salient points about the key factor, the key role that Judeo-Christian thinking, jurisprudence, and tradition held in the founding and the foundational thinking of the United States of America. So we're going to get to a clip from Darrell Castle, 2016 presidential nominee from the Constitution Party, and we're also going to talk a little bit about their message from their chairman on theocracy and the Constitution Party when we return from this quick break. Thank you for listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. If you want to follow us online, you can follow us on Twitter at Matt D. Holloway or at the HoloNet. Facebook, we're on facebook.com/HoloNet. And as always, we're on theholonet.com and holonet.lanterns.buzz. You're listening to the Lanterns Media Network. We'll be back after a short break.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Now we're going to hop into the Wayback Machine. And now we're going to go back to that heady day back in June of 2016 when it seemed like third-party candidates had a chance. Yeah, I better shut that off before I get sued. Alright, so we're going to go back to this 2016 post, Why I Am Running for President of the United States, from Mr. Daryl Castle. And again, this was July 2016, so almost exactly a year ago. We're just 6 days over a year ago. And he put out this, it's about a 7-minute YouTube video, and he explains why at this critical time in history he put aside his business and personal life to run for president, and why he feels it's so important that he win. Now we'll go to Mr. Daryl Castle, presidential nominee from the Constitution Party.
Hello, this is Daryl Castle with today's podcast. Today is Wednesday, July 20th, 2016. And since I am the Constitution Party candidate for President of the United States, on today's podcast I'm going to answer a question that I am asked quite often. And that is, why are you doing this? Sometimes the questioner precedes the question with a statement, such as, since you know you can't win, why are you doing this? That is a question I ask myself quite often. Joan and I have had many long discussions about it. In answer to the statement first, though, I don't accept that statement as true because I am a believer in God, and I choose not to impose my limits on Him. If He can create the heavens and the earth, as the Bible says He did, then He can determine who wins this election. The second reason that I don't believe I can't win is that people have a chance to hear me and then decide for themselves how they want this country to go, although the mass media tries to ignore me and shut me out of any coverage. More important than the news they speak incorrectly or with bias about is the news they choose to simply ignore. If the major networks reported on my nomination as they do others, if they carried the Constitution Party convention live as they do others, if they carried my speech live as they do others, if they reported every public word I say with bated breath as they do others, and then if they said, if he gets enough access to the 50 ballots, he could be a real force. Now that would change things, but that did not happen. What can happen, though, is that the American people don't have to follow the media like a Pavlovian experiment. They could actually do something different, and when we all wake up after the election, I could be president. Then everything that we have accepted as normal for many, many years would be different. Now back to the central question of why I am running for president. It's because I believe that everything I hold dear, everything we hold dear, is at risk. I told a reporter once that I'm trying to save my country, trying to save the republic that I love, but that doesn't go far enough. Civilization itself is at risk. The civilization going back.
Doesn't he have like the most relaxing voice you ever heard in your life? I mean, this has got to be the mellowest guy in the history of American politics. Can he like narrate my kids' bedtime stories? Because Jack would be like out in 5 minutes. Listen to this guy read like Goodnight Moon. All right, let's go back to it.
Back to the Magna Carta is at risk. Let's say that the Magna Carta represents the rule of law before the Constitution was adopted, the concept that the law applies to all and that from the king to the average citizen, all are subject to it. And no one, president or citizen alike, is above it. That came from the Magna Carta and then was enshrined in the Constitution. That concept of the rule of law is dead now, or at least dying. That it is dead was made clear to us unequivocally by James Comey's press conference about Mrs. Clinton's email scandal. There are now 2 sets of laws, one for the elite and one for us. I would use my presidency to reestablish respect for the rule of law. The Constitution itself is dying and will be dead in less than 4 months. Mrs. Clinton obviously has no respect at all for it, and Mr. Trump apparently doesn't even know what it is. He gives it no regard whatsoever. He recognizes no limits on his power. should he be elected. My election would put a halt to that continuing increase in authoritarian government. I run to limit the power of government in general and the presidency specifically rather than to increase it. The other thing that is at risk now and will grow with time is the disregard for democracy, defined simply as the right of the people to govern themselves. The Declaration of Independence says that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, but that concept is in serious trouble today. Take the Brexit vote, held recently in Great Britain, whereby the British people voted to leave the European Union. Those in favor of continued membership for their own reasons have been screaming ever since. Parliament has scheduled a vote for, I believe, August 5th to determine if the people will be forced to vote again. They make the people vote over and over until they obey. The once sovereign will of the people is no longer respected. The elite in the European Union referred to the people who voted to leave as, quote, ignorant masses and, quote, the crowd, just to show them who runs things. The second example that I can think of is the attempt to disenfranchise many people in the Republican Party by depriving them of their chosen nominee. No matter what you think about him, the popular vote, the will of the people, can be thwarted by those more able, more qualified to decide these things. I also know that unless I win this election, the American people have no chance of becoming free and independent again, no chance whatsoever. Whoever wins will continue subservience to international bodies such as the United Nations and NATO, which are unaccountable to the American people. Whoever wins, if it is not me, will continue the enslavement of the American people to the central banking cartel known as the Federal Reserve. We could take back our monetary system and be free. We could end our indebtedness to the bankers. There are many ways to do that, but no other candidate will explore those ways. Some other reasons I'm running I will list briefly, not because they're any less important, but simply due to time and space limitations. Number one, abortion will continue unabated. No one elected will do anything to stop it or even limit it. The free trade agreements will continue their offshoring of jobs, their transferring of American sovereignty to foreign corporations and unaccountable bureaucrats. Number three, the march toward a totally socialistic system, similar to that now existing in Venezuela, but with more control, will continue. Number four, rule from above through division below will continue. We will continue to be pitted, one against another, one group against another. So we become more and more divided and more easily controlled. Number five, the National Security Agency will continue to monitor all phone calls, read all emails, and the system of monitoring and control will get worse and worse. Number six, world government, world taxation through a cashless monetary system will be a reality soon.
Deep state.
I'm going to stop there because I think you get the idea. My election could stop many of these things and at least hamper the others. I can't do it without you, though. I need your help right now, this very day, for our ballot access drive. I need your money and your time. Please go to castle2016.com to donate. Email my campaign manager, Joan, that's Joan, at castle2016.com to learn how you can help me. Remember, folks, all you have to do to make all these things I mentioned come to pass is nothing. Just do nothing. We can change these things if we stand together, if we work together. Take one step, just one step of faith, and help me. At least that's the way I see it, folks. Until next time, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.
Holy crap. Oh, I'm up. All right. Oh, jeez. Yeah, okay. I'm awake. I miss it? Oh, jeez, I missed it. All right. I'm going to have to listen to that again. I fell asleep by halfway through, I think. Yeah, I think this is, played for laughs, admittedly. I really don't have a big problem with Darrell Castle. I really don't have a huge problem. But we need to face facts. The man was drowned out in his great intentions by a couple of things. Potentially the fact that I can't listen to him talk for more than 3 or 4 minutes without picking up my phone and looking at Facebook and doing 6 other things at the same time. Millennial weakness there, okay? The guy is not exactly electric on the air. I'm sure he's a very nice man. He actually still has a podcast going. You can check it out. He actually just did a recent one about CNN, and that's on castlereport.us. If you want to check that out, that's all over the Constitution Party's Twitter. But that's Darrell Castle. He has a lot of the right ideas. I would love to see the Fed dismantled. I think the Fed is the single greatest robbery in the history of mankind. You know, I'm not going to go with the whole story of the greatest theft ever. If you watch that on YouTube with Hardison and Pyle, it's a pretty awesome layout of the history of the monster Jekyll Island and the creation of the Federal Reserve. I would love to see the Federal Reserve Act repealed and for us to go back to a system of monetary advancement based on the Treasury and based on actually sound monetary policy. But the Constitution Party, as laudable as its goals, did not have the exposure, did not have an exciting electric campaign or an exciting electric candidate. And it was drowned out in the din. I mean, the Libertarian Party had Gary Johnson. If you don't like Gary Johnson, I'm not a huge fan of Gary Johnson. You have to admit, he plays well on TV. Even when he's doing badly. I mean, the Aleppo thing did more for people's awareness of the Libertarian Party than I think the Libertarian platform for the last 10 years did. So Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, while I think they were not the best candidates, I would have preferred Austin Peterson, they did good things for the Libertarian Party because the Libertarian Party did get a big turnout. The Constitution Party, not so much, despite their party ideals being right. Now, I did want to touch on this, and I know I'm about to overrun my break, but I just had to have you listen to Darrell Castle's entire spiel there because he makes a lot of sense. But the problem is he's not engaging while he makes a lot of sense. And this is the same reason why Nixon got smoked by Kennedy, is you have to be able to deliver your message. You have to have a great message, yes, but you have to also be able to deliver it. This is a media-driven society, and I don't mean Fox, NBC, ABC, Alphabet Soup. I mean, we are a media-driven society. You need to be deliverable on social media, on television, on radio. You have to have charisma. And as good of a man as I think he is, charisma is not something that Darrell Castle brought to the table. Just this commentator's opinion. Message from the chairman on ConstitutionParty.com from Frank Flukiger. I think it's Flukiger, or it might be Flukiger. Said, I have become increasingly concerned with the comments on Facebook and the other internet sources which seem to indicate that the majority of the national leadership of the Constitution Party, and particularly members of the National Executive Committee, are pursuing an agenda of promoting a theocratic government for our country. Though I cannot speak for each person individually, I can certainly speak for a large majority of both the Executive and National Committee members. The argument stems from the preamble of the national platform, which states, and I quote, "The Constitution Party gratefully acknowledges the blessing of our Lord Savior Jesus Christ as creator, preserver, and ruler of the universe and of these United States." Comment is also made on the platform statement, "The goal of the Constitution Party is to restore American jurisprudence to its biblical foundations and to limit the federal government to its constitutional boundaries." Now, what Frank, I'm not going to try that last name again, points to are the writings and minutes kept by James Madison and the other founding fathers who attended and participated in the convention in Philadelphia that produced the Constitution, hereafter referred to as the Constitutional Convention, because that's just bloody wordy. 34% of the quotes presented at the convention were from biblical sources, and yet that body of men did not even consider that their new government would be a theocracy. So why then was the Bible so often quoted by these men in the Constitutional Convention? And he goes on to say, they were among the wisest and most well-versed men in history to ever meet as one body, and they fully understood that the principles taught in the Bible were the source of good and sound government. Which makes complete sense. If you look at it, the concepts of the Enlightenment and of the scientific progress that was made in the mid to late 1700s and on into the 1800s were driven by the concept of free Protestant Christian ideals. Sorry, Catholics, because it's the truth. When the Protestant churches broke away from the Catholic Church, it's not a case of coincidence that this is about the same time that the Enlightenment really got kicked off and we started to see an explosion in open scientific thinking. It was no longer restrained by the dogmatic doctrine of the one Catholic Church at that point. So the Catholic Church had lost a bit of its overall power over the populace, and specifically its ability to restrain science. Sorry, folks, read history. This happened. They had a bad habit of killing people who said the earth was round and that the earth rotated around the sun. But when Protestantism came about, with Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, the first one, nailed the theses on the church door. Stay with me. After Lutheranism came about with Martin Luther, and Protestantism began to take hold, then we saw an explosion of scientific thinking. And following that, we saw the scientific and political enlightenment of the late 1700s. So yes, these were enlightened thinkers, but they came at it from a religious perspective, because the Bible, as interpreted in a Protestant sense, rather than in the Catholic dogmatic sense of that day, was all about individual responsibility and liberty. And those are the teachings that came from both the Old Testament, or the Jewish Bible, the Torah, and the New Testament, the definitively Christian writings. And among those records were concepts of representative government, as Frank goes on to say, the right of an accused to be heard by a jury of his peers, the understanding that men are innocent until proven guilty, the concept that the truth of a matter had to be witnessed by at least 2 and preferably more witnesses. These are biblical concepts. These are Judeo-Christian concepts that the American government, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence arose from. So rather than dismiss the Constitution Party as a theocratic party, a party of Christians-only club based on a couple of cherry-picked quotes, admittedly from their national platform, which mirror things said by the founders, because Washington called for the blessings of God and said that the hand of God was instrumental in the American Revolution. And the framers of the Declaration of Independence swore upon their lives, their properties, and their sacred honor. All right, I probably screwed that up. And they called on God. And they called on divine providence, the protection of divine providence. So when we think about these things, don't paint it in a theocratic concept, because it's not true. Paint it in the mindset of the Founding Fathers, where the Constitution Party does derive. Now, I think the Constitution Party is a great idea. But I think the Constitution Party needs some new life breathed into it. And again, that's this commentator's theory. Now, when we come back from this quick break, we're going to jump into the latest controversy to grip my home state of Arizona. It seems that Dr. Kelly Ward, in a radio appearance on WOWO just last week, made some commentary that has earned her the rebuke of many here in the state of Arizona and around the country, pertaining to the medical status and future of sitting Senator John McCain. Senator McCain, whom she ran against in the 2016 election. Now, what we're going to talk about are the comments that she made during that interview, and also the statement that was issued by the Ward campaign. I've sent some questions over to the Ward campaign. I unfortunately haven't received those back yet. When I do, look for a piece on lanterns.buzz and also on theholonet.com. I'll get that out to you, asking them for some clarification and giving Dr. Ward an opportunity to try to clear the air here. Dr. Ward appeared locally here on 550 KFYI with Mike Broomhead. You can find that interview on iHeartRadio. And it seemed that there wasn't really very much of a rollback here of what Dr. Ward said. So I want clarification on this, but you can listen for yourself. We're going to have the full quotes from the WOWO interview and also the statement that was sent out by the Ward campaign, and hopefully we'll be able to get those answers back from the Ward campaign in a timely fashion. All that and more when we return here on the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network, We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
All right, folks, welcome back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Now, as promised, we're going to have that audio from the WWO interview with Dr. Kelly Ward. She was on the Pat Miller Show, interviewed by Matt Locke. I believe that's based out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we're going to go to that audio right now for you.
Yeah, I am a family physician, so I'm not a neurosurgeon, but a glioblastoma is the name of the cancer that he has, and it's particular to the brain. It generally has little tentacles that go throughout some of the tissue, and really we don't have a lot of great treatments for a cancer like this. The average life expectancy, the median time that people survive is about 14 to 15 months. 2-year survival is only 30%. So it's a pretty devastating diagnosis. And so, I feel for Senator McCain and his family because, they've got a lot of decisions ahead of them. They've got to decide, they've got to deal with finding out that he has this devastating terminal illness and then figure out how he's going to be able to cope with being treated, whether it's, obviously it's not curative treatment, but palliative treatment so that he's not suffering as he suffers the effects of this disease.
Well, and Kelly, and that's exactly it. I heard Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell today on the Fox News update saying they can't wait to have Senator McCain back, this kind of stuff. John McCain's 80 years old. He's not a spring chicken. He has a disease that you just said has maybe the best chance case scenario 14 to 16, 18 months. What does this look like for Arizona? If John McCain cannot fulfill his duties as senator, because as I filled in the audience, you ran against John McCain this very term. So the term just started in January of this year for 6 years. What does the state of Arizona do if John McCain can no longer be senator?
Well, and I would never presume to say what someone's prognosis is without having examined.
Right.
And as a Christian, I know there can always be miracles, but the likelihood that John McCain is going to be able to come back to the Senate and be at full force for the people of our state and the people of the United States is low. That likelihood is low. So in our state, we don't have a quick special election or anything if someone retires or resigns or steps away from their position. Our governor, our Republican governor, will appoint someone to fill that seat. It has to be someone from the same party, so it has to be a Republican.
Good.
And they will fill that seat until the time of the next general election. So in 2018, it's likely that we will have 2 Senate seats up for grabs.
Okay.
One for a 4-year term, that would be the remainder of Senator McCain's term, and one for Jeff Blake's 6-year term.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because that's one of the questions I had, not knowing what was going on there, was if the governor actually appoints an interim person into that position, it's not for the entire 6 years then. It's just until the next election coming up, which would be 2018.
Right, the next general, right,
so,
the next general election. So it can't be a special or
right.
A ballot measure or something like that. It has to be a general election.
So let me ask you this question, Kelly.
Sure.
You ran against John. You're running against Jeff Flake right now, who is another rhino, which you need to beat the pants off of him, by the way. We are big supporters of Dr. Kelly Ward out there in Arizona. Does your name get thrown in a hat for this 2-year deal or no?
Well, I certainly hope so because, I have a proven track record in the Arizona State Senate of being extremely effective and of listening to the voice of the people that I represent. And, I made an extremely good showing against Senator McCain against all odds. You know, he outspent me nearly 10-1. He and the super PAC called Grassroots Action PAC spent over $10 million seeking to destroy my character, my reputation, and my political future. However, I have emerged from those ashes much stronger, and really I am, you know, beating the pants off of Jeff Flake already.
Well,
so, you know, some people told me that Jeff Flake would do well to encourage the governor to appoint me because that would take the pressure off of him.
We'll go ahead and cut it there because they kind of move on to some more Jeff Flake-centric talk. But I just wanted to make sure, I realized that was a bit lengthy, it took up a good chunk of a segment, that I played this quote in full. These two quotes, which Dr. Ward has presented are not connected to one another, but I played them in sequence. There was no editing for time there. I did cut off Matt Locke's question at the beginning. His question at the beginning was asking Dr. Ward to explain Senator McCain's condition in a medical context, given her medical background as an experienced doctor. So she went ahead and did that, and was very, very clear that Senator McCain, in her opinion, is dealing with a terminal illness, and that there is a very, very low long-term survivability of this type of cancer. I believe she said it's about 33% at 2 years, and typical lifespan is 13 to 18 months, if I'm not mistaken. So right at the outset, it's a very, very dark projection for Senator McCain. And then in one of my questions that I sent out to the Kelly Ward team, the Dr. Ward team, was that she makes the assertion that she would not make a diagnosis without seeing someone. Would not make a prognosis, rather. She wouldn't make a prognosis. But then she goes on to say that he couldn't continue in the Senate. And I went ahead and I did some digging here, and according to Cancer.net, one of the big features of a prognosis is the ability for one to return to work. So it would seem here that Dr. Ward, you know, on one hand says, far be it for her to make a prognosis, and then proceeds to more or less do so, and that's according to Cancer.net, a blog by Dr. Bayok. And her exact quote was, "I would never presume to say what someone's prognosis is without having examined them. As a Christian, I know there can always be miracles, but the likelihood that John McCain is going to be able to come back to the Senate and be at full force for the people of our state and the people of the United States is low." So, you know, the presumption not to say what someone's prognosis is, and then the act of giving what is essentially a layman's partial prognosis, seems contradictory to me. So I'm waiting to hear back the response from Dr. Ward and Dr. Ward's campaign on what they have to say about that, and whether that could be misconstrued or whether that's not what she was going for there. At the very worst, this is god-awful optics for the Ward campaign. This is terrible looking. People have described it as ghoulish. People have said it's opportunistic. I was taking a look actually at the comments here just on the WOWO article, and Ward to McCain stepped down so I can be appointed to replace you, the Rightly report, without having something of a killer instinct. Usually it's disguised a little better than this WOWO interview with Kelly Ward. Republican vulture Kelly Ward wants McCain to step down so she can step up. Daily Trends. And, this is very, very damning commentary online. Extremely damning. So, I would let you know first and foremost that, full disclosure, I've interviewed Dr. Kelly Ward on 3 occasions. I interviewed her at President Trump's 2016 rally here in Phoenix. Actually, anniversary of that just passed. I also interviewed her during her run against Senator John McCain. Found her to be very pleasant, very affable in both of those contexts. I've also met her a number of times at rallies other than those. We both spoke at a rally in downtown Phoenix last year. And every single time, I've found her to be a very pleasant person. I found her to be extremely intelligent, and I've supported her bids for Senate. I supported her bid to run against Senator McCain, and I've looked into her run with Senator Jeff Flake, and that's a bit of a ways coming. But this gives me pause, not because I think that Dr. Ward's a vulture, not that I think she has this kind of opportunism in her heart. I think this was a bad judgment call. I think this was a very bad slip-up, and I think it is really being turned against her in the court of media. I don't believe for a second that she and her campaign are handling this correctly. At all. Some of the tweets that have come from the Ward campaign have been absolutely baffling. She had a bit of a feud with local talk show host Mike Broomhead, where she said on July 24th, "At Broomhead Show, you ignore my request to come on, but have no qualms about joining the coordinated smear attempt. Have me come on KFYI." And this was just a back and forth where Broomhead replies, "Smear, I read your statement verbatim and also played your unedited audio," which I just did too. "I also invited you on the show. I've always been fair to you." And it's going back and forth about who fought who didn't come on whose show. And Dr. Ward went on the show the next day. Apparently it was a good interview. They went back and forth, got a little bit heated. I'm not going to, drop in that audio as well. I wanted you to hear the original audio that Dr. Ward had that caused the controversy to begin with. And I also wanted to give you the original statement from the Ward campaign. Now, this came from Dr. Ward's press secretary, and exactly follows. "My prayers are with Senator McCain and his family. The medical reality of his diagnosis is grim. Senator McCain has an aggressive brain cancer that is both devastating and debilitating. When the time comes that Senator McCain can no longer perform his duties in the Senate at full capacity, he owes it to the people of Arizona to step aside. Senator McCain and his family have a lot of hard decisions to make. As a doctor, I've counseled patients in similar situations, and these end-of-life choices are never easy. I usually advise terminal patients to reduce stress, relax, and spend time laughing with loved ones. The Senate has complicated and difficult problems to deal with, and Arizona deserves to be represented by someone who can focus on these challenges. I hope and pray that Senator McCain will be comfortable as he battles this terrible disease." Again, in this statement, Dr. Ward's campaign is emphasizing the terminal nature of Senator McCain's cancer, using phrases like terminal, end of life, grim diagnosis. I apologize. She didn't use the phrase terminal in that statement. She did use the phrase terminal in her interview on WOWO. But the Ward campaign and Dr. Ward herself have emphasized that it is the doctor's belief that Senator McCain is very likely to succumb to this cancer. Whereas Mike Broomhead on his Friday show had on a prominent neurosurgeon, I believe from New York, actually, a very prominent neurosurgeon there. I think it was at Beth Israel Hospital, who stated that the location of the cancerous mass and its rather thorough removal actually gave Senator McCain a positive prognosis, having actually read the charts and seen the results of the surgery that was performed on him. So there's a bit of conflict here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and question Dr. Ward's qualifications. To my understanding, this is not Dr. Ward's specific field. Dr. Ward, to my understanding, is an MD. I don't believe that she's a doctor of oncology. I'm going to go back and check that. But if some of the foremost experts on this type of glioblastoma in the country are saying that Senator McCain's cancer is survivable, then it would seem that this statement from the Ward campaign would be at the least ill-timed, at the worst ill-timed and ill-conceived. And I really honestly believe that the only solution here for the Ward campaign is a full-blown mea culpa. Rather than Dr. Ward getting on Twitter and doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on the narrative that there is a coordinated media campaign to smear her. Now, I can pull a Google search, too, and I see Washington Post, Zero Hedge, making mention of this, CBS News, Huffington Post, And the list goes on and on of the large major news outlets that have covered this story. I want to give Dr. Kelly Ward an opportunity to tell us in her own words her feelings on this. I'm waiting to get those questions back. But now you've heard the original text, the original interview on WOWO, and the original text of her campaign statement pertaining to Senator John McCain. I say to you, make your own judgment. Make your own discernment based on these facts about Dr. Kelly Ward. I've always been a fan. Based on this most recent gaffe, I feel that she and her campaign have handled it poorly. And I can't say that it reflects well upon her. As far as my final decision, should the election come up when we do the primary for 2018, I'm not a fan of Jeff Flake. I don't see myself voting for him, but I do believe that Dr. Ward has a long road ahead of her before she can put this controversy behind her, and she needs to put it to bed rather quickly. She reported that according to campaign polling, that she is ahead of Senator Flake by approximately 17 points, I believe she said during her interview with Mike Broomhead. I would see that lead shrinking if she's not able to successfully make this up to her constituency, her hoped for constituency, and also to the nation as a whole. This entire episode did nothing good for the political reputation of one Dr. Kelly Ward. There's a great deal of work to be done, but the work begins with acknowledging that this was handled wrong. That this was handled improperly by her campaign, and that she spoke a bit too soon. And while her comments may have been heartfelt, they were immediately soured by this concept of her being appointed, which doesn't seem to have been an initiative of her own, but a response to a logical question coming from Matt Locke. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the latest developments in the United States Senate's ongoing battle to repeal Obamacare and replace it. Now, today, according to The Hill, 4 GOP senators are threatening to block the so-called skinny repeal. Those would be Senators John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Ron Johnson, and Bill Cassidy. They said they are prepared to vote against the skinny repeal unless they get a guarantee that it will go to a conference committee with the House. The skinny bill as a policy is a disaster, Graham said. And the skinny bill as a replacement for Obamacare is a fraud. That, when we return from this quick break. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm Matt Holloway. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/theholonet. Actually, I'm sorry, it's facebook.com/holonet. And Twitter at Matt D. Holloway or at HoloNet. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
The skinny bill as a policy is a disaster. The skinny bill as a replacement for Obamacare is a fraud, Graham added. I'd rather get it out of the way and let it collapse than have a half-assed approach to where it is now our problem. If this is not an indication to you that everyone, and I mean everyone, needs to start calling into the Senate and start calling into the House to get some sanity back into the chambers of Congress, I don't know what is. We've reached the point where a vote of no confidence on House and Senate leadership is in order. attempt after attempt after attempt has been made by the Senate to come to some sort of a viable conclusion. They even attempted the out-and-out erasure of Obamacare, a straight, clean repeal which died in the Senate. If the Senate does not pass a bill, both chambers will have to approve whatever emerges from a House-Senate conference. Alternatively, the House could simply approve the Senate's skinny bill, a prospect that is as ugly as anything else. Folks, we are moving quickly toward a single-payer system, and that was the entire point the entire time. If you believe for a single second that the Obama administration wanted the Affordable Care Act to remain dominant in American healthcare for more than the presidential term of President Barack Hussein Obama, you're dreaming. This was an orchestrated move. It was designed to collapse. What's more, it was designed to collapse under the next administration. Think about it. Now, Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn from Texas said he has no formal assurances from the House, but has every expectation a conference committee will be called. He said, there has been some communication in which it has been reported to me that Paul Ryan said, listen to all those clauses, there has been some communication in which it has been reported to me that Paul Ryan said, this is like I heard from Janie, who heard from Ashley, who said to Tommy, who mentioned to Brad, who whispered to Jimmy. Okay, there has been some communication in which it has been reported to me that Paul Ryan said the House is preparing to go to conference, Cornyn said, noting, I have not talked to Paul Ryan. The Senate doesn't determine whether the House goes to conference. This is the definition of insanity. And this is everything that is wrong with American politics today. The fact that despite overwhelming mandate from their voters to remove the crushing burden of Obamacare from the American people, Republicans in the House and Senate just can't get it done. You know what I see in 2018? Two things. I see a rout in the House and the Senate. And I'm not talking about a Democratic win here. I'm talking about a revolt against incumbents. And I see a huge push for Article 5. Because the people of this nation are out of options. And that brings us to a close today for this episode of the Holonet Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Just as a quick recap, we got to talk to the Constitution Party shortly after the initial recording of this episode. So we are going to have the Constitution Party on. It's going to be in one of the following weeks. So we're going to have part 3 of third-party problems today, and part 3.5 in the future to come, where we're actually going to have either Frank Flukiger, who is the national chairman of the party, or Gary Welsh, who is the communications director, join us here on the Holonet Podcast. Hopefully they enjoy the segment pertaining to the Constitution Party and have a sense of humor. I've been assured that Daryl Castle does have a sense of humor, and he might even get a kick out of that. But we're going to do a continuance of our episode here pertaining to the Constitution Party, because I believe that coalition politics are going to be the way forward, that there is going to be an Article 5 convention, and that the time of the dialectic is ending because the American people have had it. If the Republican Party fails in their mandate this time, it will not survive. And if the Democratic Party cannot unite around a single figure to contest President Trump in 2020, the Democratic Party will not survive. It wouldn't shock me if you saw Bernie Sanders walk away with his supporters to break off and form a Democratic Socialist Party in this country at this point. The dialectic is ending, folks. It is game over. In the coming weeks, we'll discuss the new game and the new future of American politics, because it starts right here, right now, with you at the new conservative resistance on the Holonet Podcast here at the Lanterns Media Network. From Phoenix, good night, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.